Hello, my name is Chris Piscaglia. Today I'll be talking about the photo survey solution. Before we get started with a demo, I just want to talk briefly about some of the use cases and why we think photo survey is important. We partnered with the city of New Orleans earlier this year to develop the photo survey solution, and it really was around the inventory of blighted properties. But we also have a few other use cases that the photo survey solution could be used for and configured for. One of those being rapid damage assessments. So how can we configure the application for windshield type damage assessments, but also even things like targeting reappraisal efforts in certain areas of the city or county, and even identifying structures that might pose health or safety concerns. Recently, we've seen these parcel surveys start to come up, and this slide represents a few places where there's ongoing surveys happening, and what we've seen, especially in Gary, Indiana, Detroit, and other places, is that they have to send teams of people into the field to inventory the property. So they go in the field to take photographs, they take notes down on paper even, maybe record it digitally, and then bring it back to the office to process it. So really what we did with New Orleans, and this is where the guys in New Orleans really gave us some really interesting ideas about how to make it easy and streamline the whole process. So what is the actual offering? The photo survey solution is really a workflow to help you collect and process location-aware photo data, so photos that were taken in the field, process those, and then provide a very focused property inventory application that helps you survey the properties based on a variety of workflows and use cases that we mentioned earlier, so from blight all the way up to damage assessment and everything else in between. We also wanted to simplify the data collection and processing so that it doesn't take much time to quickly author the photo survey itself. We also wanted to support many different types of inventories, remove bias from the application, and what we'll do is we'll show that later on, but there's actually an option to randomize the properties that are being surveyed and therefore removing bias. We also wanted to promote ongoing community participation by allowing the application to be crowdsourced. So you can make the application publicly accessible. A citizen can log into the application and help perform the property surveys.
So there's some challenges here. So how do we use standard devices like phones, cameras with GPS to collect large amounts of photos and then actually process them? Also providing a very simple and focused property survey application that's configurable. So how do I configure this app for different types of surveys? We also wanted to randomize the properties that are being surveyed in the application, which I mentioned, so there's some challenges there as well. And then how do I provide useful maps that I can use back in the office to dictate work out to certain personnel or certain departments like code enforcement needs to go out and do weed abatement. How do we provide some useful reports and dashboards on the other end so that you can use that to take action? So those are some of the challenges. We also wanted to leverage commercially available cameras, so we didn't want to come up with a kind of a custom way of doing this. So you'll notice that we have a few examples of these here. One of them being a Garmin Verb camera, which I'm using for testing and we use here in Redlands to drive around. They have a GPS embedded within them. They're actually used as an action camera, so you can mount it to a helmet, you can strap it to yourself, go diving or jump out of an airplane, but they work really well for street level photos too. So we're using those. Sony has a few options that have GPS and they're even waterproof. And then TomTom more recently has come out with a camera that has a GPS as well that you can mount. So here's just a few examples, but we also want to leverage just standard phones that have location-enabled cameras. So take your iPhone, walk the street, take photographs. There's actually a colleague of ours in the St. Louis office that did just that, walked down the street before he went to work and captured photos along the street with his camera phone, smartphone. So there's a bunch of different ways you can capture the photos, and we'll get into the details about that and some best practices there as well. So without further ado, actually, we'll do one more slide that just shows the overall flow quickly on the left-hand side, the property photos being taken. In my case, I'm strapping or mounting the cameras to a vehicle and just driving the city. So you can see there my van with the camera mounted to it. A photo survey toolbox that helps you process those photos, and that runs in ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Desktop. I'll show the Pro tools today. Those photos are then published to your portal, and then you publish a series of maps that represent each property survey that you want to publish, and then the photo survey application is published off of those web maps, and I'll show that as well today. And then on the bottom there are a series of dashboards and useful reports you can use to take action within your community. So operational dashboards there. So that's kind of the overall flow. And I guess without further ado now, we'll go right into the demo. Before we do that, is there anybody have any questions about what we're trying to accomplish or what we're up to? Is there anything coming through the chat, Allison? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's actually an option. So randomization was a requirement that the city of New Orleans kind of brought to us and challenged us with, and that's something that you can turn on or off. And we've also heard, Allison, you and I went to the city down the street, right? And they mentioned that they want to use it for code enforcement purposes. And their code enforcement officers have particular beats or neighborhoods that they go to, and they could turn off the randomization to walk down the street physically, but also use that in the application the same way. So it's definitely an option. You can turn it on or off in the app. All right. Okay. So we'll start the tour of the overall solution in ArcGIS Pro. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because there are a series of there is a tool that you need to use to process the photos that you take. And it's a very simple tool. It allows you to specify passenger and driver side photos. So like I said earlier, I'm actually mounting the camera's driver and passenger side on a vehicle and driving the street. So that's why it has those two options. A staging area where you want to house the photos locally, your parcel database. So the tool is designed to associate the photos that you take to particular parcels or properties. So you need a parcel layer, where your parcel identification code is, and then a simple survey question file that comes with the solution that gives you a general property survey, which can be modified and extended to support different types of surveys. So that's ArcGIS Pro. Once you've published that content after running them through the tools, you get a very simple web map. And that web map just contains points with a series of photos representing each photo that was taken. And if you click on one of those points, there's a series of questions associated with that point. So this is just a very simple point web map that's used to power the application. So publish that. And once you have that web map published, you can then publish the photo survey application. And this particular photo survey app has been configured for crowdsourcing. So you see a guest login access, also Facebook, Google, and Twitter. And the reason why is because in this example, the city or county wants to crowdsource the surveys. So what a citizen would do, or somebody that's actually going to do the survey, would log in with one of these methods. In this case, I'm going to use my Twitter account and authorize the photo survey application to use my social media credentials. It'll log in and present me with the first random property to be surveyed, since I set this survey up to be random. You can turn that on or off like we mentioned before. The first thing you'll see is a big photo. You'll also see a carousel at the bottom. So what I can do, if a photo is obstructed as an example, is scroll through the photos to find one that gives me a better view, maybe to do the survey. So in this case, it's going to ask me a few questions. Is there a structure on the property? Obviously, yes. The lot does not appear to be overgrown. The one next door looks a little bit like it's overgrown, but not this one. It's probably, just knowing this area of town, it's probably a crawl space foundation type. Doesn't appear to be any roof damage, but I can't really tell, so I'm just going to say maybe to that one. Is there exterior damage? Doesn't look like it's too bad, but we'll say maybe. It's graffiti? No. No boarded windows or doors, and then submit the survey. In this case, like I mentioned before, since it's random, we're going to get the next random property to be surveyed, a carousel of images, I drove the streets about 20 to 25 miles an hour. The cameras that I was using take photos at 1 to 5 second increments, somewhere in that range. So I'm getting about 2 to 3 photos per property on average. And the slower you drive, or the more photos you take, obviously will be more photos in the application. One of the interesting things too is you can like certain photos when you're going through the survey. So if one photo is better than the other, you can say that one's actually a better photo, and that's tagged to the property. So the next time you publish these photos, you might want to promote a certain image or remove images that could be potentially bad. You can also go to your profile. So in this case, I've logged in with Twitter. So my profile tells me that I've submitted 2 surveys. I have my avatar and my name for my account, and also where I kind of rank amongst others that are also submitting surveys. So I have 3 surveys to the next level. So we've built in some gamification into the app, so you can kind of entice people back to to do more surveys. And that's an idea that came from the city of New Orleans as well, and it was a really unique idea. We wanted to make sure we captured that when we built the photo survey app. All right, then I can go back to the survey and continue on. I can also skip properties. So if there is a property that that either the photo is just not a good quality, or I just want to skip it, you can also skip properties, and it'll bring you the next random property to be surveyed. So that's kind of how the overall navigation of the application works. You can also customize things like the help. So if you want to put a nice explanation of how to use the application, you can modify this. And one of the nice things about this application is it doesn't require anything else but the web map to be configured. So, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I'll kind of talk in detail about that web map. But the nice thing about the application is that it only consumes that web map, and you don't have to do any other configuration to make it work. So that's the photo survey application. Does anybody at this point have any questions about how the app works, or any other concerns or questions about it? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's a good question. What I'll do, Scott, is I'll come back to the tools, and we'll talk about how they work specifically, and then even some best practices about how to acquire the photos, and what you're going to need as a baseline for the photos that you want to use. So we'll talk about that in a second. Anything else coming through that you guys can see? Okay. I'll go ahead and move on. So once there's been enough surveys to actually view them on a dashboard, oh, sorry, let me log in here. You can author a very simple dashboard that shows you the overall status of the surveys that have been contributed. So in this case, there's 85 total surveys that have been sent in. And what I'm getting right away is kind of some indicators. So what I'm seeing here is properties that have reported yard overgrowth, reported graffiti, and we're going to actually have, with the next release, Scott mentioned it earlier in the presentation, an application configuration of this dashboard, so you can author this as part of the overall photo survey solution. So we'll have an operations dashboard configuration, but also some a very simple help topic on how you can configure it for property surveys. So there's just one quick example of how you can view the information once it's been contributed. And then for the next thing here, we're going to go right to the help. So what I want to just talk about briefly is what you need, what you get when you download the solution, and then where you can get more information about the photo capturing. And we'll talk about the tools as well as part of that. So here's the main solution page. We have a quick overview of what the solution is, the experience that you're going to need. So in this case, the tools you'll need for processing the photos require some basic geoprocessing skills. You need to know how to publish content to your portal, and you need to have some knowledge about authoring web maps and that kind of thing. It requires the advanced version of ArcGIS Desktop. So if you're going to be processing photos with ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap, which it works in both, you need an advanced license. You need to have online subscription, or if you want to host your content on premises, you can have ArcGIS Server, and you can also store your photos in an enterprise database if you'd like. So that's actually something that we recommend. So if you have lots of photos, it makes sense to have an enterprise database. And some quick information about the browsers that are supported. So once you download this solution, you're going to get a series of a set of tools to help you process the photos. But before you do that, we have a quick help topic on the street level photo acquisition. And this really steps you through some of the best practices about acquiring the photos. And there's some questions you need to ask before you just go ahead and start doing this. So one of the things you're going to want to do is figure out if you want to have weather resistant cameras. So the Verb cameras that we're using, which are pictured here, are waterproof, so you can mount them on the exterior of the vehicle. And that's something you might want to take into account if you're going to be working in an area where you have a lot of inclement weather, that kind of thing. And then for the cameras themselves, can they take photos in intervals? So I mentioned before I was mounting the cameras to my vehicle and driving around the city. So you want to make sure that if you're going to do that, that the cameras can automatically take photographs for you. So you don't have to keep on hitting the camera to take a photograph. So these cameras that we're using take photographs in 1 second to, I think, 5-second increments, even down to a half second with the newest version, so you can do that as well. And then one of the most important things is that the photo data has coordinates. So you have to have an XY coordinate on the photograph. Those are stored in a standard EXIF format, so as long as that information's on the photo, you can use any photograph. So one of the things that you also need to take into account is, how do I get the photographs off the camera and then ready to process? So many cameras allow you to connect with Bluetooth, but also just with USB. So the cameras that we're using allow you just to hook them up to the computer, offload all the photographs, and then process them. It's also stored. It's also treated as just an external drive, so you can just use it directly, process the photos directly off that drive if you want to do that as well. But that's something you need to take into account. So if you're using a phone as an example, you need to have a good way of just getting your photos off that phone and onto the computer that you want to process. How many vehicles do you want to use? So in my example, in my testing, I just have one vehicle I'm using, so I have 2 cameras. But if you want to acquire photos more quickly, or you want to have a historical record of photographs for a period of time, you might want to strap these cameras to multiple vehicles. One of the ideas that we got from a city down the street was, can we use the street cleaners that have to canvass the city anyways to capture the photos? So that was an interesting way of thinking about it. So you might want to have more than just one set of cameras. The faster you drive, the lower amount of photos you're going to get per property. So take that into account as well. So if you want to capture a lot of photos for each property, or at least 5 to 6, then you have to drive slowly. And then, do you want to leverage volunteer organizations? So can you leverage existing folks within the organization, but also outside, that want to help and help you capture photos? So there's just some ideas about the photo collection, and like I said, it doesn't have to be the way that we did it, meaning mounted to a vehicle, but you can walk the street, walk certain neighborhoods. If it's a historical survey and just a few historical neighborhoods, then you might not need to drive around to capture those photos. So just take those things into account when you do when you start taking photos. So there's the acquisition. For publishing the photos, like I said, there's a simple tool that helps you publish the photos to that web map that I mentioned, and then from there the application can be configured. But to process the photos, the tools basically take the tool takes the photograph, extracts the GPS location from it, and then associates it to the property based on proximity. If you have the cameras mounted on a vehicle, left and right side, those photos are associated to the parcels left and right side of the vehicle. So that's how the tools in a nutshell work. I won't get into too much detail about which methods we're using within the tool to do that, but they are designed at the first release to associate the photo to a particular parcel. And I wonder if is there any more questions about how the tools work in the chat, Scott, or anything that I missed there? Yeah, so it's a good question, Allison. If you're, and it happened quite a bit to me when I was driving on Redlands. So when you're stopped at a stop sign, the camera that I have continues to take photographs right at that location. So the tools actually merge all of those points into a single one, so you don't end up with 500 pictures of the same exact thing. They'll merge those photographs into one single point. Yep, but it won't do it for a point a foot off. So you will have that one. There's a few properties in the Try It Live service that we have that is also accessible through this page that you'll see me drive around the corner, and it captured I think 15 to 20 photographs for that. So you'll see the photograph starting at the front of the parcel and then kind of bending around the corner to the end of it. And that's just the nature of how the tools work. And that is actually a really good way to capture the side as well as the front of that property. So you get kind of a full picture of that. Sure. So the cameras that we're using, so specifically for kind of street level photography, I know that there has been some rumblings of who was it? Was it Samsung, Scott? Or I can't remember the name of the company that was creating a camera for a contribution to Google Street Map, but it hasn't been released yet. I don't think there's anything specifically commercially available for this, but the cameras that we're using are actually work really well. The GPS doesn't have to be super accurate because the tools will take into account kind of some fuzziness with the GPS accuracy. But it will drop photos that just can't be associated to certain parcels as well. And what we do is we take the photographs that weren't associated and push them out to a table. But I guess to answer your question, there isn't anything specifically available for this, but we do have some recommendations as to what you can use if you want some more detail on that. Yep. Yep, that's a good point. Okay, so once you run this, go ahead. Is that just, I mean, just a high definition camera? I assume that means. Oh. Yeah, we didn't really look into that, but it's definitely interesting. Be good to talk about that some more. I'm not sure how you would use it in the application per se, but if you have some ideas, let us know. Yeah, so this is kind of an overview of the tools themselves. Once you run the tool, really all you get is a point that is in the centroid of the parcel that has many photos associated with it, or a single photo if you only got one photo per property. You might just get one, one photograph. So that's what you end up with, and from there is when you take that point feature class and then publish it to a web map, and that's what you're seeing here. So that's really a result of running the tools and then just simply publishing that as a feature service in ArcGIS Online or using your portal. And that point feature class can also be a enterprise database that you have on premises that you share with your organization as well. So this is just a point feature class, feature service. And like I mentioned before, what we've done is associated a series of questions with that point. So in the actual point feature class, when it's run through the tools, there are a series of fields added to that point feature class that have the questions that you want to ask right inside of them. So what you'll see here is the pop-up with the question. So this is just text saying, is there the same questions that you saw in the application. So is there a structure on the property? Is the lot overgrown? What's the foundation type? Is there roof damage? And so on. And then this one has actually been surveyed, so you can see the answer to those questions right in the service, because these are just attributes on a field that represent the answer to that question. And these are all configurable, so if you want to come up with different questions, you can do that. If you want to extend this list or remove things from it, you can do that as well. So this is really just kind of a baseline set of questions that you can ask. And they come with the solution offering, so when you download it, you get these questions out of the box. But you can change them to represent a different type of survey. And that's really all the application needs to be configured. There's some details in the web map, so the description, the summary, there's some other information in the actual web map that's fully documented that you need to have. But that's really all you need to power the application. So the questions that you're seeing in the app are coming directly from that web map. So if you change something in the web map, it'll change the application on the fly. You don't have to worry about republishing. The questions will be updated in the application. So that's kind of nice, and you can publish many different types of surveys pretty quickly doing that, depending on what you want to ask. And you might want to have different configurations of the application to do things like we mentioned earlier, like turn off the randomization if it's just going to be an internal survey, or if you want to have the code enforcement officers answer a different set of questions or come up with their own questions about the property, you can do that as well. So that's all configurable via the web map. So is there any questions on that part of the configuration? Sure. So since yeah, it's a good question. If you have stacked parcels, you'll get a point, I believe, for every one of those stacked parcels. So it's going to associate the photos probably multiple times to that point. So it's definitely something you want to consider when you go and you feed in your parcel layer. You probably want to flatten those out and have a single point for each unit, or for that condo. I think that would probably be the best way to do it. Yeah, unless you have, I guess, individual units for that condo as features, you're going to get, whatever photos were taken on the street for that condominium development. All right. Well, that's kind of an overview of the solution. Scott, is there anything else you want to touch on, or that I forgot to talk about? Yeah, sure. And there's a couple different ways you can do it. So, you can configure the application. It has to be configured on premises, so there's a configuration file that you have to have. This specifies the web map. But there's also a way where you can just publish the application once and feed it many different types of surveys from different web maps. So if you publish the application once, in this case we're just using the one that we've published on GitHub, and I'm just referencing the web map that you want to use for that app. So you could have the same application published for many types of surveys, and just have the application URL reference the web map that you want to use to push out. So that's one way to do it. Let me crack open the actual configuration file to show you that. It's showing up on my other monitor here. Allison, do you know how to bring this thing to the front, to the main screen? Ah, there we go. There we go. I got it. Yep, it was showing up on my other monitor, I think. So if I take a look at the photo survey config file here, so I go to the actual app config. Oh yeah, I could do that. Okay, so here's the actual configuration file for the app. Hopefully you guys can see this. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. No, looks like I can't. So basically all you have to do is specify the web map ID, which is right here. And this is where you can also turn things on or off. So for instance, the thumbnail limits, one of the advanced configuration options. So if you have many photos taken for a single property, you can make this number larger or smaller depending on what you want to see in the app. In this case, I've limited the application to have only 10 thumbnails. So if there are more photos for a property, they'll still show up in the application, but you just won't see the thumbnails for every single property at the bottom. That's one advanced configuration option. Here's the randomization. You can turn that on or off, true or false. You can also allow or disallow guest submissions. So in my example, I had guest submissions turned on, but you can also turn that off if you'd like. Here's where you enter your Facebook, Google Plus, or Twitter, or actually you don't have to specify anything for Twitter, but if you want to allow Facebook and Google Plus login, you have to specify an app ID for those, and we give you instructions how to do that in the help topic as well. And that's it. That's all you really need. And you don't even need to specify a lot of these things if you just want to use the application out of the box. You can just specify the web app ID and how you want people to log in, and it will just work. But like I said, there's another way to do it, and you can publish the application and then just specify the map ID in the app itself or in the URL of the app to use different web maps. So you don't necessarily have to have multiple applications published to have many different surveys. You can just reference that web map in each one of the URLs of the application. Okay. Sure. Yeah. The camera that I'm using has two different modes of photographs. It has a wide and a narrow zoom focus. And if you had the wide one on, depending on how you had the cameras oriented, in this case I had them pretty much level with the vehicle and pointing straight forward. But we've had somebody even on our team that's taken it a step further and mounted the cameras using the wide angle at a 45 degree and captured poles, so utility poles. So it can be done. It's all, I think it really depends on how you want to mount the cameras and then what kind of photo you want to take. And then what the camera is capable of doing. The cameras that we're using have those options, but some cameras don't. But it's definitely doable. It just depends on how you want to mount the cameras. We also had somebody come to us with the idea of a pavement survey, pavement condition survey. So you could actually mount the cameras downward and capture the pavement condition or even curb condition of the curbing. and then use that to do the survey as well. So I think it really depends on how you want to mount the cameras and then what the cameras are actually capable of doing. This application might not be used for a full damage assessment report, but it could be used for an initial report of areas that may have been affected more than others. And so you can kind of use it as a windshield type survey, but I wouldn't necessarily use it for a full-blown damage assessment survey. The photos can be used as evidence for something like that, but it wouldn't be a replacement for a full damage assessment. I don't think anyways. So, yeah. Scott, do you have anything to add there? Yeah, and I think that, one of the interesting things with the dashboard, and I thought about this, is, identifying hotspots within a city or a county even, it could be damage, but it could also be just general blight in certain areas. And quickly with this app, if you randomize it, the surveys, you can start to get a really good understanding and idea of where areas might be more affected than others and send people into the field with collector, like Scott was saying, to go and do a more thorough investigation or survey. Well, I will say that, yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have a drone. It'd be kind of fun. But one of the things that our emergency management team that we're working with closely on this is thinking about is the CAP photos, the Civil Air Patrol photographs that are oblique images that they take after disasters and things. So how could those photos be used in the app? And we have some initial work already being done in that area. So how do you take an oblique image, and then what do you associate it to? What is the field of view for that image? And then what questions would you want to ask about that image? Because it's a different scale, right? It's not going to be, with a drone you can get really close, with a CAP image not so close. So we are thinking about how you can integrate different types of imagery. And I think that obliques from drones would be really interesting for sure, because you can see the whole back of the property, right? That's one of the things that we don't have with street level photos. Yeah, the nice thing about the cameras that I'm using is that once you plug it into the computer, it's treated as an external drive, and you can actually use that external drive to just run directly the tools directly against. So there really isn't a lot of copying the data over. However, you can do that if you'd like to. But yeah, you definitely need to get the photos somewhere before you process them. Yeah. And Scott, you mentioned the action camera part of it too. They're really inexpensive compared to like a full SLR camera or anything like that. So they can be bought pretty inexpensively and up and running. The first set of cameras, it was like $500, and I was up, I was driving that day, and I think we got them, with a 1-day shipping option or something, and it showed up, within a day or so, and we were just capturing photos. And you can tell the quality of these ones are really good, and this is the lowest quality that the cameras were taking. I think they're 7 megapixel. Which is also something you want to consider too. Just the amount of size and the amount of photos that you want to take. You're going to be using a lot of disk space for that, or database space for that as well. So it's nice to have, these are about 2 megabytes a piece, which is, manageable. I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, I think some of the, Scott, what's the default, you know what the default is in an iPhone? I mean, it's pretty high, I think, the resolution. So you just want to be, you want, yeah, so you just want to be, you want to take that into account before you start, just taking a bunch of photos. Yeah, and I think there's, I mean, as long as you manage your time, I mean, I was able to collect 700 photos in one run before I went to work in the morning. So I think that if you can organize the way that you want to collect it around, certain timing, I mean, that took me about, I think about an hour, and I collected that many photos. So if it doesn't have to be all at once either. It can be, you want to do target certain neighborhoods to start, and then kind of build up your library of photos over time. But if you want to make, I think that was an interesting idea, Scott, the iCloud idea, because they're being pushed there anyways, bringing them down locally, and then you kind of have almost like a live feed coming in. We've also thought about, Scott, for the next release, right, we thought about having the ability to upload a photo. So, we're thinking about ways that people can contribute photos to, not just the ones that you've inventoried, but what if there's an updated photo that you don't have on file, and somebody's actually out there with a camera, a citizen just taking a photograph? How do they take that photo and then upload it? So we are thinking that way. How do you make the library better, more up to date, and how do we even allow things like contributions? Yep, we even heard from like the assessors, right, Scott, that they already might have street level photos in their appraisal system, but they might be a year old by the time Yeah, they don't have an up-to-date one. So this would be a way of just capturing those photos for even another business system, not even necessarily the photo survey app, but good workflow for capturing the photos in general. Yep. Yep, good question. So at the first release, we don't allow the same property to be surveyed more than once unless you put it back into the queue. So basically, there's a process of clearing out so once you've gathered that survey information, putting that point just by clearing it out back into the queue. And I think I'm thinking about putting a help topic in there specifically about that. Like, how do you get the property back into the app? But currently, once the property's been surveyed, it's taken out of that queue for the survey unless you put it back in. So it has to be put back in. You're not going to get multiple surveys in the same property right off the bat. It'd be put back into the app. Geophone would definitely be used as another way to access the service that has the questions, but you wouldn't see the photo, so it would be kind of a different workflow. But yeah, and if we can't get the audio figured out, we did do a meetup that's already recorded that does have a shorter version of the photo survey app that you can take a look at. It's about 55 minutes in. We can send the link through the chat window, but hopefully we can get this thing all buttoned up and sent up there. Yeah, I think that's on there too. Yep.